Part 2. Ash panted heavily. Her body trembled every time the grass rustled in the wind. Like a small animal, she looked fearfully in every direction. She was surrounded by forest, and there were few places here where the light could reach. The spreading canopies of the densely packed vegetation blocked out any illumination from the sky, and so there was almost none on the surface. Although this environment would normally be difficult for a human being to navigate, in lieu of illumination, Ash used the dark vision spell, which made her surroundings seem as bright as day. However, even with this spell, she still needed a lot of concentration to pick out grass patches which people could be hiding in, tree trunks that might conceal enemies behind them, and listen to the branches creaking as they swayed in the wind. As an arcane magic caster, Ash could not count on her own physical strength to shake off any monsters if they leaped onto her and pinned her down. Normally, she would have help from her friends, but now there was nobody to support her, nobody to cover her, and nobody to heal her. In other words, all she could do was remain alert for foes who were trying to advance into close quarters, keep her distance, and flee. She was on edge because she was keenly aware of this fact, and it sapped her mental strength even more than normal. Her original plan was to use a fly spell to make her get away, since she was outside. But once she flew above the trees, she saw a huge black shape in the sky which seemed to be searching for something, so she abandoned that plan. Once she detected the presence of the giant bat, she could not find it in herself to try and turn it into a contest of speed. That was because even though invisibility could fool visual senses, it could not deceive the special sensory organs of a bat. After verifying that her surroundings were safe, Ash took flight once more, at a snail's pace. She was proceeding as slowly as possible with her fly spell because she wanted to observe her surroundings. If she went at full speed, she would not be able to react quickly enough even if she were on alert and spotted a threat, and that would mean she would be leaping into the mouth of any monsters which pursued her. In order to avoid this, she deliberately lowered her speed. Finally, Ash felt the layer of magic energy surrounding her growing thin. Her fly spell's duration was about to run out. She slowly descended to the ground. The question now was, what should she do? Casting fly again would not be a problem. She could feel that she had enough mana for it. However, dark vision was also a crucial spell, and she also had to reserve enough mana for defensive spells in case of combat. The third-tier spell, fly, was one of the highest-ranked spells Ash knew how to use. This also meant that it was one of the most rare spells she had. If possible, she wanted to avoid using it. Ignoring the present circumstances, even she did not know how long it would take to get out of this forest without the use of spells that would stave off her fatigue. And without the ability to fly, she could not even confirm her current location. On the way here, Ash had occasionally risen above the forest canopy and used the big tree beside the Colosseum as a landmark. When she used fly to travel, she lost her sense of direction. If she stayed in the forest, she could not spot the big tree, and she was not able to climb trees either. "Where can I rest?" Ash mumbled to herself. Certainly, if she restored her mana through sleep, she could use fly more often, and movement under the sun would be safer. This was particularly true for the forest, where the monsters tended to be nocturnal. It might be better for her to curl up somewhere and wait for daybreak, rather than force herself to carry on in the dark forest. However, Ash had no idea where the safe places were. If Amina were here, she would probably know. And if Roberdic or Hekran were around, she could rest easy even in dangerous areas. However, her reliable companions were not with her. Amina, Roberdic. Ash curled up beside a huge tree, and thought of her comrades. Liars. There had been no word from him after so long. As expected, they had not been able to escape. No, that was something she had known from the beginning. There was no way they could beat the ridiculous entity known as Ains. Even so, was she a fool for holding on to the faint hope of seeing him again? Ash sat on the ground, leaned her back on the great tree, and closed her eyes. She knew it was dangerous. Still, she wanted to close her eyes. As the memory of the three of them came to mind, she squeezed her eyelids shut. The icy cool sensation of the bark against her head was very comfortable. It was only after she had rested for a while that she realized just how tired she had been. Her stress turned into emotional exhaustion, and it rose without stopping. She let her head rest against the tree. And then she opened her eyes wide. Dark vision painted the world of night in fresh, bright colors, but she had no explanation for what she saw in her field of vision. Someone was watching Ash. It was like nothing Ash had ever seen before, and her eyes seemed transfixed on the sight of the beautiful girl. She was dressed in a velvet, soft ball gown dyed in the darkest shade of black, a garment that seemed thoroughly unsuited for her present environment. Her skin was as pale as wax. A single hand stroked her long, platinum hair, which seemed about to brush across Ash's face. Though she was a noble daughter, Ash had never seen a girl this beautiful before. If she were to show up at a formal dance, men would flock to her like moths to a flame, purely out of desire for her beauty. Her crimson pupils radiated an irresistible charm that seemed to draw Ash's soul into them. But Ash immediately returned to her senses. There was no way someone like that would be in a place like this. Especially not someone with both feet on the tree trunk, standing parallel to the ground in utter defiance of gravity. It was obvious that this was a pursuer sent by Ains. Still, it was not completely impossible that she might have been a resident in the forest for a long time. Tag. You're it. Her fleeting hopes had been utterly dashed. A pursuer. Ash leapt away to open up a gap, pointing her staff at the girl. The girl seemed disinterested in Ash, and neatly walked down the tree trunk and onto the floor. Come now, start running. If I defeat you here, I can flee more safely. Even as she said this, Ash smiled bitterly in her heart. There was no way she could beat any pursuer sent by Ains, a being who existed outside the bounds of common sense. Knowing this, the reason why she said so was to gauge the other party's reaction. Then, by all means, although I can only play with you for a while. Her attitude said that she completely understood the difference in power between the two of them. Which was to say, if she fought Ash, it would be nothing more than toying with her. Fly. Ash cast her spell and began to flee. There was not the leisurely, slow flight she had demonstrated on the ground. In one swift movement she was aloft, covering her face with her arms as she broke through the forest canopy and soared into the air. Under the night sky, Ash looked around once more. She was on guard for the bat-like monster she had seen earlier. However, it seemed that it was nowhere around. And so, all that was left was to escape. Yes, yes, keep it up, keep it up. The beautiful voice called out to Ash, who was desperately trying to flee. Her heart lurched. Casting frantic glances around, Ash tried to see where it was coming from. It was from in front and above her. When had Shethe girl from just now was there. Lightning. Bluish-white lightning leapt from her staff's head and cleaved through the night. This was Ash's strongest attack spell. Even though it pierced the girl, the smile did not vanish from her face. Ash was sure of it. This was a being on par with Ains, which meant that there was no way Ash could defeat her. The girl cheerfully spoke to Ash, who was eager to flee. Come, my familiars. Closing square bracket quote dot. An enormous pair of wings extended from behind the girl's back. They were like a bat's in shape but far, far larger. An enormous bat flew out from behind her, like it had detached from her body. And of course, no bat with glowing crimson eyes like that could be a mere beast. The girl smiled from beside the giant bat, whose wings beat steadily through the air. It was a smile that froze Asha's body like ice, a smile that did not seem to belong on someone her age at all. Well then, to continue to flee. Ash fled. All she did was flee. She flew into the forest to lose her pursuer, and the branches scratched her body as she fled. Since she had discarded her companions to escape, that meant she had to make it out of here no matter what. In her mind, she would do anything to make that happen. And after a flight of who knew how long, Ash stared despair in the face. It was a wall. An invisible wall stood in front of her. The world went on beyond it, but Asha's body was blocked by that wall. Ash was now 200 meters above ground level, and the invisible wall had reached this high. This is... Ash muttered to herself as despair seeped into her heart. She flew and felt around with her hands. But... wall, 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 still a wall. No matter where she flew, her hands told her there was something hard in her way. What is this? A wall, of course. It was an answer to her self-directed mutterings. Ash turned around with an idea of who she might see. It was as she had expected. The girl from earlier. But now she had a trio of giant bats as her escorts. Though it seems you've gotten the wrong impression. This is the 6th floor of the Great Tomb of Nazarick. That is to say, you're underground. This... Ash pointed to the world. The sky, the stars, the gently blowing wind, the forest which stretched as far as the eye could see. Although she did not think this place could be under the earth, when it came to these people, even that might be a possibility. The 41 Supreme Beings, our most august creators, once ruled this place. It was created by them, and even we don't understand all of it. They created a world that would make them like gods. That's correct. To us, they are beings on the same level as gods. Gods with Ain Sama as their leader. Ash looked around. She had accepted it. As expected, after seeing all this, the only thing she could do was accept it. There was no way she would be returning alive. Well then, not fleeing. Would it even be possible? Of course not. There was never any intention to allow you to escape to begin with. Is that so? Ash gripped her staff tightly with both hands and charged the girl. She could no longer use spells since she was out of mana. However, even in this most hopeless of situations, she still had to try her best until the very last moment. This was the duty of Ash, the soul-serving member of Foresight. There, you've done your best. The girl's reply to Ash's fully determined charge was little more than bored dismissal. Then, your sad little escape attempt ends here. Though it's a shame I couldn't see you break down in tears. The girl easily caught the staff with one hand, and yanked it toward herself. Ash was thrown off balance and fell into the arms of the girl. The two of them ended up embracing in mid-air. In this position, the girl buried her face into Ash's neck. Although Ash tried to struggle, the girl who stuck to her like glue could not be shaken off. She breathed hotly on Ash's neck, and Ash's body quivered. The stink of sweat. Not being able to keep one's body clean was part and parcel of the worker's life for Ash. This was true for all workers, adventurers, travelers, and anyone who spent time moving around outside. Even if they got dirty, the appropriate response would be, "So what?" However, she still felt deeply ashamed at being told this by a girl who was younger and more beautiful than her. The girl's face left Ash's neck. A feeling of revulsion swept up over Ash as she looked into those crimson eyes. Within those eyes burned a lust for the female body, stained with the same carnal desire that men possessed for women. Beatrice. You will die without experiencing any suffering. Be grateful to Ain Sama for his mercy. Ash wanted to respond, but instead all she felt was surprise at the fact that her body had been immobilized. It was as though those crimson pupils had stolen away her soul. At last, Ash realized the true identity of the girl. She was not human, she was a vampire. And then, the girl's face drew closer to Ash's, her tongue slipping past her lips to lightly lick at Ash's cheeks. Salty. The girl laughed, and despair swallowed Ash's soul. That only made the girl laugh harder. Her lips split apart to her ears. The red of her irises spread to engulf their respective eyeballs. With a cracking sound, she opened her mouth. What had once been neat, pearly white teeth were now things that made people think of medical syringes, in multiple rows like those of a shark. Her lascivious voice was laced with lewd undertones, and clear drool oozed from the corners of her mouth. And then, terror enveloped Ash completely. Aha! Ash's mind lost hold on consciousness in the face of the laughing monster that reeked of blood. The last thing that went through her mind was the faces of her two sisters waiting for her. Ooh, fainted already? Then there's no need to knock you out with magic. You can embrace death in your dreams.